In 1938, Orson Welles read a story about aliens on the radio, and 1 million Americans believed the invasion was real. They fled their homes. They loaded guns. Some reportedly tried to take their own lives. It was just a voice in the air, but radio had already proven something terrifying. If you control what people hear, you control what people believe. And the most dangerous regimes in history understood this perfectly. Welcome to Object Origins, where we dig into the history of things that quietly shaped the world. Today, we're talking about radio. Not the device sitting in your kitchen, not the app on your phone. I mean the idea. The raw, world-altering idea that a human voice could travel invisibly through the air and land inside someone's head miles away. In this video, you'll see how radio went from a single spark over the Atlantic Ocean to a machine for saving lives, then to a weapon for destroying free thought, and finally, to something that is still reshaping the world right now. Stick around for the Cold War chapter, because what happened between two radio signals on opposite sides of an Iron Curtain is one of the most underrated information wars in modern history. Quick note before we begin. This video covers historical events including wartime propaganda and political manipulation. The goal is understanding, not endorsement, of any side, any regime, or any ideology. To understand the history of radio, you have to go back to December 12, 1901. A young Italian inventor named Guglielmo Marconi is standing on a freezing clifftop in Newfoundland, Canada, holding a wire attached to a kite. And somewhere on the other side of the Atlantic Ocean, in Cornwall, England, his team is transmitting a signal. 3 dots, Morse code for the letter S, and Marconi hears it. Now, scientists at the time genuinely believed this was impossible. The Earth is curved. Radio waves travel in straight lines. The signal should have disappeared into space. But it didn't, and nobody fully understood why until later, when researchers discovered that the upper atmosphere was bouncing the signal back down. The planet itself was acting as a relay. That moment didn't just prove wireless communication was possible, it rewrote the rules of what distance meant. For the first time in human history, information could move faster than any ship, any train, any human body carrying a letter. Within a decade, that speed would save hundreds of lives. April 1912. The RMS Titanic hits an iceberg in the North Atlantic and begins to sink. We all know the story, but here's the part that often gets lost. Radio is the reason anyone survived at all. The ship's wireless operators, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride, immediately began transmitting distress signals. The Carpathia, about 58 miles away, picked up the call and turned around at full speed. She arrived just in time to pull 710 survivors from the lifeboats. Now, here's what makes this even more remarkable. A ship called the Californian was actually closer. Some accounts put her within 20 miles of the Titanic that night. But her radio operator had gone to sleep. He'd switched off the equipment just 30 minutes before the Titanic started sinking. The distress signal went out. Nobody on the Californian heard it. Radio had proven two things at once. It could be the most powerful life-saving tool ever invented. And if you ignored it or turned it off, people died. How radio changed the world started that night in the Atlantic. From that point forward, wireless communication became mandatory on passenger ships. The technology went from novelty to necessity almost overnight. By the 1920s, radio had jumped from ships to living rooms. Families would gather around the receiver the way people today gather around a screen, but with something different in the air. Literally. The voice coming through that speaker was the only one. There was no second opinion, no comment section, no mute button. And the smartest politicians understood exactly what that meant. In 1933, Franklin D. Roosevelt became the first world leader to truly weaponize radio for trust. Not control, trust. His fireside chats were not grand speeches. They were quiet, direct, almost intimate conversations. He'd explain a banking crisis or a war development in language that felt like a neighbor talking over a fence. Millions of Americans tuned in, and for the first time, a president genuinely felt, like someone who was speaking to you. Roosevelt used the power of radio to hold a nation together through the Great Depression and the Second World War. He understood that the voice is the most human channel there is. It bypasses the eye, it goes straight to the gut. But that same quality, that intimacy, that directness, that ability to make a stranger's voice feel trusted, was about to be turned into something far darker. This is where the history of radio gets genuinely chilling. When the Nazi Party came to power in Germany in 1933, Joseph Goebbels, Hitler's Minister of Propaganda, understood immediately that radio was the most powerful psychological weapon available. Not tanks, not posters, radio. Within months, his ministry had developed and mass-produced a device called the Volksempfänger, the people's receiver. It was cheap, intentionally cheap. The goal was to get one into every German home. By the late 1930s, Germany had one of the highest rates of radio ownership in the world. But here's what made the Volksempfänger truly sinister. It was engineered, by design, to not receive foreign radio stations. The frequency range was deliberately limited. German citizens could hear German state radio. They could not easily hear the BBC. They could not hear what was happening outside their own borders. The device wasn't just a receiver, it was a filter, a wall made of silence. In radio history documentary accounts, historians often describe this as one of the earliest and most complete examples of a closed information ecosystem, an entire population hearing only what the state wanted them to hear, with the alternative physically blocked out of the hardware itself. That is what the power of radio looks like in the wrong hands. After World War II, the information war didn't end. It just changed frequency. The Soviet Union built its own version of a state-controlled radio system, tightly managed, ideologically curated, designed to tell citizens what the Communist Party wanted them to believe about their country and the world beyond it. The West's answer was Radio Free Europe, launched in 1950. The idea was simple and radical. Broadcast uncensored news, cultural programming, and political commentary directly into countries behind the Iron Curtain, in their own languages: Polish, Czech, Hungarian, Romanian, Russian. Soviet authorities scrambled to jam the signal. They spent enormous resources. Some estimates suggest more than the cost of the broadcasts themselves, trying to block the transmission. Which tells you something important. You don't spend that kind of money trying to silence something that doesn't matter. For millions of people living under authoritarian systems, Radio Free Europe was the only source of information that wasn't filtered through a state. It was, for some of them, the only proof that another version of reality existed. Two radio signals, two competing pictures of the world. And the one that wasn't free did everything it could to prevent people from hearing the one that was. So let's come back to where we started. A voice in the air, invisible, unverifiable, but felt as real as anything physical. In a little over 50 years, radio went from a spark across the Atlantic to a tool that saved lives on a sinking ship, helped a president hold a nation together, enabled some of the most sophisticated mass propaganda in human history, and then became the front line of a global ideological war. And a quick reminder, the events covered here, especially the propaganda chapters, are presented as history. Understanding how these tools were used is exactly how we recognize them when they appear in new forms. Which brings me to the final point. Because radio never really ended, it evolved. The podcast you're listening to right now, the audio stream on your phone, the voice in your earbuds, that is radio, Radio 2.0. And here's what's genuinely different this time. For the first time in 100 years of this technology's history, the broadcast doesn't require a government, a corporation, or a transmitter tower. Anyone with a microphone and an internet connection can reach millions of people. That's extraordinary. It's also, if you've been paying attention to this video, a little terrifying. If this kind of deep dive into the history of things is what you're here for, hit subscribe, because this is exactly what Object Origins does. Every video, we take an object, an invention, an idea, and we pull on the thread until the whole story comes out. And if you want to keep going right now, the next video is right there waiting for you. I'll see you in it.